Someone said to me is networking here has to be your second job. You have to it has to be a second job.
The challenge is that, one of the challenges anyway, is that we know is most opportunities lie, for want of a better word, in the hidden job market. And it's not necessarily what is posted on a job site. Part of our work is to help lower those barriers and get trained immigrants in front of employers where there isn't actually a job posting, but they're expressing there's a need for talent, and that potentially we can source that talent for them. Because often there's not necessarily an explicit job posting, although.
Welcome back to the Newcomers Podcast, people, where I explore what it means to be an immigrant to immigrants like myself. Today, I'm talking with Simon Trevarthen, who runs TRIEC, which is Toronto Regional Immigrant Employment Council. Mm-hmm. And so they do it all things: employment, immigrants, employers. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I think while in the pre-call, we had this interesting thing where he talks about how immigrants often come in, or we come in as immigrants, and we see this thing where we say, my job, when you should be thinking of my career, because I think it all flows into this, my first question, which is, how do we even start helping immigrants see that, like, you come in here, you're highly skilled? I mean, people could argue about highly skilled versus low skilled and all that stuff, but how do you start helping people see when you move into a new country that we're talking about helping you your career, not helping you get a job? Because one of them is just you saying, I just want to get working right now. One is you saying to yourself, I'm tying myself to where the country is going to, and I can literally plan for the future. Like, so how do you all help people kind of see that shift?
So, I mean, immigration to a new country is a huge step for anybody and any family that's about to undertake that. And it's understandable that many people, when they arrive in a new country, need income, need to support their family and themselves. Yeah. And so, yes, it is typical quite often that people end up just getting a job, unless they've been transferred from a company, from an international company to Canada. They're actually just gaining employment. And that's a valuable and valid thing to do. The key, though, is to think about, if you are coming as an internationally trained professional, is how do you leverage that talent? How do you leverage that experience in the Canadian setting and build a stepping stone towards leveraging that talent in this economy? And that really is that stepping stones around building a career. It may be in the same profession. So if you're an engineer, you become an engineer. But it may be an aligned profession. So you're using that skills and retraining or upskilling into something new. And it may be sometimes even something that you want to explore differently, using some of your skills and leveraging them in new ways. And so really the purpose of, when you think about a career generally has a progression, a ladder, a way to go forward. And that means not only into managerial type roles, but exploring and diversifying what opportunities you have in front of you. And so that's kind of, I would say, the difference. And the key, what we do at TRIEC, is really support immigrants to fast track them into careers, not just jobs. Because if you have that talent, what are the barriers that are holding people back from utilizing their talents into a career of meaning and purpose, but also potentially something which is more lucrative to them and their families?
Yeah, I like how you put it, when you put it that way. But, how do people even deal with this? Just this thing. So, and I don't know what the answer to it is, and I don't know if I'm asking the question right, but it's, as you're talking, I kept thinking about, there's the image of, I came to this country, I'm starting my life afresh, and then I have to forget everything I knew and who I was and all that stuff and kind of start again. Because it just feels like, when you put it like, meaningful career and all that, it sounds really good. But when I think about all the conversations I've been in with a lot of immigrants, it just feels like people struggle to see the way you're putting it right now, which is, hey, you moved here, you can literally leverage your skills, your talents, all those
Mm-hmm.
things, and basically find a meaningful career and contribute to the economy. But instead, people, it just feels like the messaging out there, and I don't know where that messaging is coming from, is, hey, why do I have to let go of the person I was before? Like, why do I need to let go of who I used to be and become a new person?
All right.
It just feels like that's a huge messaging out there, because you're right. When is one part of immigrating is I can start again, but
Right.
it just feels like that seems missing from most of the conversations I see people have.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful point, Josie. I mean, the reality is, work is often tied to our sense of identity and who we think
Yes.
we are. And so it can be in many cases where, as an immigrant, you come and you may have to take a role which is slightly less than you had in your former country. Um, as a professional. But I think the key is in our work is to also kind of say to people, what are some of the challenges and gaps in actually reconnecting to the economy as you were as a professional. And it can be that you think about open the aperture and really think about your experiences and where they can be deployed in this economy. And so this really came home to me in a conversation I had recently with somebody who was I think, an Iranian trained engineer. And you can imagine the Iranian economy, heavily oil and gas. Well, in the Ontario economy, there really isn't much oil and gas opportunities as an engineer. But this individual had retrained in the aerospace industry as a project manager. They had taken those experiences, retrained up skills, and now in the aerospace industry. And I think that's a really important story in the sense that it's important to understand, well, where is this economy? What are the areas of this parts of this economy which are growing, which parts of this economy which are even contracting, and which parts of this economy are actually kind of stabilizing, where there's always going to be employment, but there are major parts of our economy which are growth areas. And aviation and the aerospace industry in particular is hungry for talent because they're actually in demand for talent. Having spoken to people in post secondary institutions that run aviation programs, often those companies come to the graduating class and say, how many of us, your students, can I take? I mean, it's really that kind of demand for talent. And that's seen in other areas of our economy as we move to that more post industrial area of these real growth areas. And so a key part is saying, hey, this is my skills and my talent, but how do I map that against this economy? What's growing in the fast growing sectors in the economy today?
Yeah. I think it's like getting people to see that thing of where this is your talent. This is because I really like how you break it up. Where's the economy growing to? Where's stagnating? Where's always just going to keep growing? And just saying to yourself, once you understand that, then you're like, okay, where do I fit in with what I've known before this?
And I think there's a piece there too, which is around aligned professions. So let's
Interesting.
use the example again as an engineer. And while you're retraining or requalifying potentially as an engineer, there may be roles which are aligned. So a project manager on a construction or infrastructure project, which gets you experience in the industry today as you requalify as an engineer. I mean, as an example there, I think there's about 300,000 engineers with all of the different variations that there is in that profession right across Canada. Something like almost a third are set to retire in the next 10 years or so.
Hmm.
So if you think about it in an Ontario perspective, that's almost 50,000. But demand is increasing
Yeah.
and the specialities are differentiating too. So in many sectors, we know that there's a demographic shift because we have a kind of an older demographic in our which is set to retire. There's a need for talent as a pipeline. So really understanding, well, where is my sector today? Where are the growth areas and where is the talent shortages? And actually putting yourself in that perspective and kind of redefining yourself in that. Many of these areas of acute growth, where there's growth in the sector, but also labor shortages, many of them will actually pay for a talented immigrant to retrain in that sector.
Mm.
So there is that kind of conveyor belt of talent. So if you think of that sweet spot of not just like as a student graduate, but that sweet spot of, say, a senior contributor level. So not really management, not definitely executive, but that sweet spot of somebody who can go in at a kind of a project manager level, let's say that kind of level. There's definitely huge demand for those right across the economy. And we see that even though the economy itself is having challenges.
Mm. Just curious, where does credentialing come into play in all of this? Because it
Well, I
feels
think
like that's a big problem.
and it has always been a challenge about credentials. I think a lot of work has been done to lower some of those barriers and to remove in areas where Canadian experience is not necessarily required. It could often still reappear though in biases. People have employment biases, no doubt. And there are ways to actually get your current credentials kind of assessed to see where you sit and where your gaps are if you want to re-qualify as that profession. So we can definitely see those resources, and we can definitely point you as an organization, organizations that can help you do that. So that's critical. And it really depends, again, what you're trying to accomplish. We have many regulated professions,
Yeah.
and there are differences even between provinces, not only just within a province. But there is often a way in which you can recredentialize. It takes a lot of time often. It can be an expense. And there is work done to definitely reduce that. But the other piece of that is, okay, that's a reality that you may face, a barrier you may face. The question is, and some of the work we're trying to do is, what aligned profession or aligned work in a career can you do in that sector while you potentially requalify?
Mm.
And that is critical because you're getting valuable sector experience that will help you indefinitely when you do re-enter the workforce as that accredited professional. So that's another way to think around that question. But accreditation is still and remains a challenge, not only in, say, the question of engineering, but you can imagine in healthcare and other professional groups as well.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a good idea to kind of to get people to say, find your like build sector experience while you build get your credentials back up, because it does feel like a place where people fall through the cracks, or where people just kind of just start getting frustrated is they spend so much time trying to get back on track with your
Mm-hmm.
credentials, and that itself is expensive. It takes time. You're not working, and so you're frustrated, and then so you take on certain kind of jobs, and you get trapped in that. Like you just kind of get trapped in that system where you can afford to pay for your credentialing. You are in a job you don't like, and then, like I always say to everyone, the immigrant loses, Canada loses. You
Yep.
know,
When talent is not, to want a better harvested and leveraged, we all lose as a society. And I
yeah,
think, when people reach the summit of their talents, then we all thrive.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think, you know, the economy is in a tough place. We're, 7, 8% unemployment. Youth unemployment is higher. We think that maybe immigrant employment is even higher than that. But the question is not just those raw, do you have a job, don't have a job. That's the question of what we're talking about, which is the underemployment, where you may have a job, but it's not actually to the level of your experience and the level of your abilities. And I think unlocking those doors, we talked a little bit, there are credentialized paths and the challenges within those. But I think part of it is also, we identified, is what are all of the opportunities in the economy in the sector I wish to go into? We often think of healthcare, and often the healthcare debate turns into one of the clinicians, the doctors and the nurses, which are both valuable, and there's shortages definitely in those two kind of silos. But the healthcare system is more than that. There are dozens of different clinical professions. Think of pharmacy, but lab techs, you name all those kinds of professions. But there also is beyond what we think of as healthcare equals hospital, which is often a kind of a
mm,
kind of a mentality, which is like think about the healthcare system as a more broader piece, which is the biopharma and biotech industry, which are huge, the medical devices industry, which is huge. And so understanding the various parts of that ecosystem helps you understand all of the potential opportunities as a professional and how you can potentially employ your skills within that ecosystem.
How do you all help people see this? Because this is such an interesting way to frame it, which is like your career isn't exactly linear.
Mhm.
It's this much broader than you think. Because there's also, I don't call it a barrier or a bottleneck, but it's just maybe you call it understanding. You come from a country where a certain career means A, B, C, D, E, F, and then you come to
Mhm.
Canada, and that career means A to Z. That kind of thing. And so, how
Yeah.
do you help people see that your life isn't exactly as linear as it used to be when you moved to a new country?
Well, I think immigrants have proven throughout the years their ability to adapt. And I think that ability to adapt is to see how you can leverage your skills in different areas. I also think in many cases there's a different way of seeing where the opportunity lies. For instance, the skilled trades of which have real labor shortages right across the bat, they can be potentially very lucrative careers for many people. And many of the skilled trades have real shortages, and you can actually make some very good living for yourself and your family going into those skilled trades. Again, there may be a process of retraining in those trades, but there's also the ability of being a solo entrepreneur or being a business person yourself. So it's again opening the aperture of all the different opportunities. So looking at the growth sectors,
Mm.
we talk a lot in Canada about the housing crisis. Well, the solution to the housing crisis, in short, is to build more houses, which means construction, which means infrastructural projects, etc. So we know that will be despite the economic kind of dynamics, will be a growth sector and remain so. So again, there's a huge opportunity in that people necessarily may not be aware of, and there actually can be very well paid kind of roles in those sectors. Even as I said, ballooning out from what we think of as the healthcare sector to all of its different kind of permeations, and the private sectors there in the healthcare space, but also the public sector with hospitals and public health. So there's a whole bunch of those kinds of parameters. It's also looking at, and I think the key is to do your research and understand where and how the economy is structured. So let's take engineering. Obviously, there's large engineering companies that build infrastructure projects, that build tunnels and subways, you name it. But then there's also the public sector entities that support that, public sector agencies. There's also major municipalities that employ engineers in road construction and water systems and those kind of things. So part of our work is to help professionals navigate the complexities of those sectors and see where they could potentially slot their skills into. And I think with the advent of things like AI and other tools, there's better ways to do that kind of self assessment of how you can actually kind of leverage your skills and where there are potential groups, or I would say job families, that potentially you wouldn't be exposed to or think of as your direct kind of a linear kind of approach to when thinking about a career.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned AI because I mean, there's the argument people make, and I think you also mentioned this in the pre-call where we talked about how AI also means that the resume, job application system that was already breaking, it seems to have just
Mhm.
kind of broken further, and so
Yeah, I
you know,
mean, I don't think anyone really knows what the implications of AI are today on the job market and in particularly the hiring process. It's still relatively in its infancy. And so, on the one side, we know that there is immense demand for people who have the talents and skills to go into that industry. So around AI, the companies that do that, the startups, but also medium-sized and even large firms, will be an immense demand, the growth sector. But in terms of AI itself, it's quite clear that it will replicate or even remove some, and it's known as the white collar killer. And the idea being is it will remove many kind of analyst type roles, which were previously done, generally done by lower analyst kind of levels. It will be removing them or automating those types of roles. Even some of the big consulting companies have reduced the number of graduates they take every year, because many of the jobs they used to give to those graduates now can be done by AI. So there's definitely a danger there. When we shrink down even further into the hiring process, it's no doubt that big companies, use AI as screening tools. They have screening methodologies. And in many cases, I've spoken to senior people in HR departments that they're facing thousands of job applicants per role. And many of those applications, those resumes, are generated by AI, the standard platforms. And they're having to weed through that chaff to find the candidate. And so I think there is a role for that kind of strategic sourcing of talent, where you actually can provide organizations, companies, a vetted source of talent, saying, hey, this is a list of 50 people we think you should look at more closely, because there is some kind of verification. Because the open calls are often leading to just a blizzard of resumes that half the time may themselves be generated by AI.
Oh, boy. Uh, Something that I got triggered a bit by it, which is for newcomers who don't fit that mid senior level. Like, how do you even deal with? And you don't have to have the answer, honestly. It's like, how do you even deal with this thing where AI also means that all of a sudden the junior roles don't exist anymore? And so, as a newcomer to the country, you're dealing with a couple of things. You don't have the social networks to kind of get past to get into this kind of roles. Um, you don't know your way around. And so you're dealing with, I need to find my way. One, two, AI means that those jobs have significantly reduced, and so I'm just kind of caught in the loop of where do I go from there. Is
Mm-hmm.
one, do you all see that at TRIEC? Two, is there anything you all do to kind of help people kind of help navigate that system?
Yeah, it's a complex question, and it's a complex kind of and dynamic ecosystem, particularly when we have a challenge, the challenges in the economy
Yeah.
as it changes too. I mean, I think the way you can unpack that is think about the 5% improvements along the curve and be open to, and one of the reasons why we've invested heavily in a mentorship program, which matches professionals with foreign trained professionals with someone in their industry, established individual in the industry, is to give them sometimes the kind of the soft understanding of the industry, not just the hard, right? We're not talking about the mechanics of actually applying to a job, but really understanding how they can navigate their space more effectively, how they can actually build those networks of people. Because in many kind of more professional roles, often your network is key in building an effective network. But some of that is also some very basic things of being open to how a resume is written in your sector in Canada, not just the same old resume that you put out. If something isn't working, what is the 5% adjustment I can make to make it more appealing? So there's definitely tools you can to improve your chances in all those kinds of pieces. There are definitely tools that can help you improve your interview skills. Yeah. There's a lot of AI tools, for instance, which you actually can feed the job description in, and it'll make a mock interview. And you can see and adjust your interview and see where your strengths, weaknesses are. There's definitely in many cases questions of how you can improve your language skills potentially, so that make it less of a barrier. So there's definitely ways along the continuum you can improve your attractiveness to an employer and your visibility. Why networking something we still focus on, and why mentorship is key, is often that because it puts a name to someone. You're a known commodity. And when you're a known commodity, it's much easier then to actually become part of that list that is interviewed potentially for a role. And that's really the key, is if you're trying to find a kind of a skilled employment, is becoming a known commodity. I mean, it goes back to something you mentioned earlier, which is kind of de-risking the hire.
Yeah.
Every hire, anyone who's been in hiring manager roles, every hire is always a risk. And so if you can de-risk yourself as a hire in every single way, a couple percent here, there, and everywhere, you can actually improve your chances of landing that opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I like that you got there, that part about de-risking, because that was going to be my next question, which is just this perception. I mean, I was talking to a hiring manager actually on Friday, and he had mentioned that thing
Mhm.
about how certain employers think hiring an immigrant is risky. Are you a cultural fit? Can you get the job done? Do you have the non-unspoken Canadian experience thing? Like just all those things. And so in the end, it does mean that for the immigrant, they have to do 2 times more to get that job than someone else. And I think while I would love to know how you all help deal with that, I think the other thing I also love to know is there some work being done to also help the employers to I mean, it's almost I don't want to say stop, because I feel like human beings struggle with stopping certain things that they've picked up.
Mhm.
But it's almost like helping them, coaching them through that process of saying, how do you review when you review an immigrant CV and make a
Mhm.
case for them without that bias of, oh, this is probably a risky candidate. Can we just put that aside for now? Because I feel like that's the bigger part to fix, not even just the immigrant themselves.
I mean, on the positive side of that ledger, listen, biases exist. There's no doubt that biases exist in the economy. On the positive side of the ledger, though, is sophisticated or let's say employers that realize where their future lies knows that a large chunk of their future professionals will come from talent sources who are immigrants, right? Particularly tend to be larger employers that see they kind of have that, a great bandwidth. But equally is true of startups as well and smaller companies. They realize that their talent workforce will be immigrant. When you look at the diversity composition of, say, a place like Toronto and the broader GTA, the reality is it is I've forgotten the exact percentage, but almost like half the population was foreign born. So
Yeah.
in many cases, there are immigrants not only trying to get a job already employed potentially in those management positions. We do have, as part of our work, programs called Lift, which are there to support employers understand the contributions of their existing immigrant workers and workforce and understand when necessary they aren't progressing in the organization. So they often we see the challenges they get into the organization, they kind of get stuck.
Mm.
So what are the barriers, internal barriers, attitudinal barriers, and kind of biases that are actually preventing immigrants getting more responsibility, improve promotions and advancements? So definitely there's work to be done in that space. On the other side of that is, there is definitely digital tools that can actually support a less biased form of hiring that doesn't have some of those inbuilt biases that can occur. And so again, vetting talent, in some ways you can vet for what people are in terms of their competencies. How do
Mm.
you test that someone is competent, not only from a technical standpoint, but also some from the leadership competencies, the team competencies, the softer skill competencies, that together with those technical skills can actually mean they're effective for the job. And so that's in addition to what is two pieces of paper, i.e. a resume, that I can actually give to an employer, say, we can strip out some of the name and the stuff that can remove some of those unwarranted biases and actually give you a list of people. Here's 10 people that we think you should look at because we've vetted them through their technical and their competencies that make a meaningful contribution to your team and what you're trying to achieve.
And then on the employee side, are there like anything you all do to kind of help people
I
deal
mean, we're
with
in the
those
process.
things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge challenge, and I think it's the question is understanding. One of the challenges we have in our system is very generic type help, and
Mm.
so generic type help has generic type solutions. And so something
Yeah.
we're working on is really drilling down in terms of those key sectors and what is special to those sectors. So engineering, let's say as an example, or healthcare, or advanced manufacturing, or ICT, IT and telecommunications, all the way to
Yeah.
cybersecurity. Well, what do you need to know as a professional trying to get a job in cybersecurity might be very different from healthcare. It's a different ecosystem, different players, different ways in which they hire, different hiring cycle, even in those different kind of verticals. And so it's key to adjust your advice, but talk to employers. And this is something that our work is very focused on. Talk to employers and say, what do you need out of a candidate to have
Mm.
confidence that you would actually speak to them. And so understanding their behavioral competencies is really critical, and then bringing that back, saying, how do we build a tool out of that so people can self-assess, so that either we can recommend them as a potential candidate, or they can actually see where their gaps are. Some of their gaps are in terms of where they might need to make some improvement. Learning could be upskilling as formal learning, or it could be soft skill improvement to, again, increase their chances in the marketplace, increase their chances of landing an opportunity.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm staying on this for this long,
Sure.
but I was gonna ask again is if we're just kind of try and put numbers to it, and you said if TRIEC talks to 10 employers about this, how many of them are very open to it? How many of them are not open to it? How many of them need some nudging and saying, "Hey, we see why we need to do this"? I'm just trying to look for hard
I,
numbers
I,
to some
I
extent.
think most employers are recognizing that their future, and it doesn't necessarily have to be large companies, by the way.
I love that.
There
Yeah.
are many small, medium-sized companies which are high growth companies in areas of high growth in our economy. Advanced manufacturing is maybe use of automation, use of robotics. They could also be everything to vertical farming in the biopharma and farming tech industries. They
Yeah.
recognize that immigrants will play a critical role in their workforce. Many of these companies have very diverse workforces already. So the question is they recognize that immigrants will play a role in that. The question is always matching the immigrant talent to those opportunities. And the
Mm.
disconnect comes from not really being able to see eye to eye of how to connect the two. And I
Mm.
think that's the challenge is getting the immigrants who have those potential skills to see where the opportunities may lie in the economy, but also how they can employ their skills in the new economy. I mean, I use the analogy, you don't want to train people how to build and manufacture typewriters, right? What you want to do is train people in the future economy because that's where the economy is growing. So I don't see necessarily the resistance from employers. There is some. There's definitely biases in the society, no doubt. And there's definitely biases in employers, right? No doubt. But I think there equally is clearly employers see that immigrants will be part of their future workforce, if not the predominant part of their workforce going forward.
Mm. That's good to hear. I think the kind of follow up on that when you talk about that resistance is how do you all handle, and from your experience, maybe if there's a practical story, I would love to hear that. How do you handle telling someone like, hey, like I see your skills at this, but it doesn't exactly align with where the country is going to. Maybe where you're working in is you are building typewriters back home for you
Right.
for that, and that doesn't exactly work here. Like, how does that conversation usually go? Are immigrants usually very open to it? Are they like, do they resist? Do they ask, like, what's that conversation like? Because I can't even imagine how it would feel if someone told me, "Hey, you got brought into the country through express entry because you had a certain kind of skill set, and then when it's now time to job hunt, I get told, well, your skill set isn't exactly where the country is going to."
Yeah. I think it's and I'll base this on we've had, I think, 25,000 successful mentorships, professional mentorships. And some of the insights we've drawn from those mentors and those that have been successful in gaining employment is that question of adaptivity and the willingness to learn and being open to learn. And it may be just that openness about feedback, right? Now, you might want to think about this approach. Yes, that's valid in where your maybe your previous experience, but you might want to think about in this approach and how to approach these
Yeah.
organizations. This is how you might want to approach it differently, because it often may not be a hard skilled question, and there can be that in terms of recertification or upskilling, definitely can be that. But often it can be questions of your openness to kind of explore different avenues, different sectors, different approaches to organizations, because the economy is shifting, but there's also areas of the economy that they may not have exposure to, that they are back home, which they might find opportunities in today, right?
Yeah.
And so it really is the question of I think that question of adaptivity and resilience. They definitely have resilience, having done the question of moving, but being openness to listening to the advice, particularly if they have a mentor who's been successful in their career, and saying, well, this is how you might want to go about it. We find often those that are most open to the advice are actually those that adapt and are most successful in securing an opportunity.
Yeah. This is a bit contentious, and you can tell me you don't want to answer it, but it's about, does TRIEC do any advocacy with the immigration ministry, in the sense that, in saying, hey, we're seeing this kind of data, and this is probably this, if we're seeing this kind of data, this flows into the way our immigration programs are designed? Because I do sometimes struggle with some of our immigration programs. Let's use the express entry I spoke about right now, in the sense that it says, hey, you have an MBA, you have X, come. And then you look at some of the jobs that are out there in the market, and you don't exactly need an MBA to do those jobs. And so you bring in someone with an MBA into the country, and they're struggling to get a job, not because of any fault of theirs, and yes, they can adapt and all that, and they can step down. But the point is that we have a system that is designed in a certain way. And then, but how they say inputs, outputs, but the thing that we have at the back end is not exactly, doesn't fit the system. And so I'm just wondering whether TRIEC does any advocacy with all the data you all sit on, and just kind of helps the government sort of guide, like, hey, let's explore XYZ and make this a bit more better for people who are coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, the government works as a big system, and we definitely are funded by both levels of government. And so, yes, there is feedback definitely in terms of how those policies operate on the ground. There's always going to be, I think, some degree of lag time between kind of what the
Yes.
economy needs and how that translates into policies and priorities. There is frustration, I know, by many immigrants that their skills aren't utilized. I think if I recount the statistic accurately, like 1 in 5 immigrants re-emigrates within 5 years because
Yeah.
they it's too tough, or they find other opportunities in other jurisdictions, and often they're the most talented of the immigrant base because they have that ability to move.
Yeah.
So it is a real challenge. It is a real challenge of people being able to settle and succeed, right? It is definitely a challenge of settling and succeed. I mean, talking nationally, there's always that challenge that immigrants understandably are drawn to our principal cities, and that there may be opportunities across the country. But again, it seems more, for various reasons, they're drawn to the weight of immigration is in our principal cities, which, so there's that dynamic too, where competition is highest for jobs and those kinds of things. So I think the key here is, I'm very much the glass is half full. And I think the best way to tackle this is to find ways to support immigrants finding where they can fit in the economy and understanding how they can navigate what is a kind of complex system and a complex sectors that they're trying to enter, and actually giving them the best tools in order for them to succeed. And often those tools are not going to be found by, a simple search. It can
Yeah.
be actually getting advice from people who've already succeeded in that sector.
Hmm. Canada, we do need to see the system as a glass half full more, honestly. I do think we need that because it feels like of recent, like just every conversation is either hard or every conversation is a bit simplistic and people just, I don't know.
I
It's
mean,
tiring
the
to
the
some extent.
economy is going through a tough time. There's tariffs, there's other challenges. Um, Inflation is high, affordability is high. Um, all of those challenges do exist, right? And it is a tough time for the economy. We know there's 7-8% unemployment. People estimate that immigrant employment might be twice that. Underemployment is definitely higher than that still. So it is a time of adjustment. And but out of every kind of piece like that, there is areas of the economy which are growing, which there is high demand. And really, for your viewers, I mean, if you think about it, advanced manufacturing is gonna grow, only grow in all of its subdivisions. Healthcare is going to grow. The broader ecosystem of healthcare is going to grow. We know that technology jobs and all of their things. I mean, many of the financial institutions are crying out for people in, say, things like cybersecurity and other kind of technology jobs. And
Hmm.
again, for an immigrant, they think of the financial sector. They think financial sector equals banks. Well,
Yes.
there's also the credit unions, and there's the insurance companies, and then there's the pension funds, and then you can go out and out and out in that circle. And I think part of it is helping to support and educate people of where is all of the potential opportunities in
Yeah.
that given vertical, albeit their experience might have been within one part of that sector back home.
Yeah. I think it kind of goes back to what we talked earlier on about. Can you start seeing these thing as exponential and not linear? Because there's that.
Mhm.
Because you're right about if you talk to me about the financial system, my first thought would be RBC and Scotiabank.
Right, and they're
Yeah.
definitely those are some of our partners, the big banks, definitely. But the financial system is just so much more than that.
Yeah.
And admit there's different ways around those experience. And to be truthful, even those large financial institutions are not just dealing with banking. You've got the
Yes.
commercial banking, the
True.
retail banking, all the things, but also
True.
many of the opportunities in those institutions are actually in their technology areas.
True.
And cybersecurity is huge in those areas. So it's not always think of them as the financial piece, but also all of the organizations that make one of those institutions effective.
Yeah. I think we're rounding up here, and I think it's more like the last question for me is so thinking about, and this I'm trying to be tactical right now. If you think about TRIEC itself, what are your three, four big, most successful programs that you have that helps newcomers?
A flagship program, historically, what we've been known for is our mentorship program, where we've matched newcomers with a established professional in their sector. And that mentor relationship lasts generally about 3 months or so. And many people, by the way, have gone on to be friends, is to kind of help that mentee at different stages. I mean, they may be just for some people, it's literally just sharpening the pencil and pointing them the right way. For others, it can be much more in depth and actually helping them build a network, build an understanding of where they're trying to go and how to actually kind of find opportunities in that given space. And that really is always going to be a key part of our work. The other piece is that is actually when we actually think about that strategic sourcing of talent. And so, how can we as an organization provide employers a kind of a vetted list of talent for a series of job families? So that you have an aging workforce, you are going to have future challenges. Here are 50 people you should look up at this in this given vertical, this bunch of job families. The third is really also working on the question of advancement and kind of improving some of the kind of dynamics for advancement of newcomers within organizations, reducing some of those systemic barriers. But to wrap it all up in a bow, I think for us, the big transformation is moving into the digital space. How do we offer all of these services on an integrated online digital platform that enables immigrants and newcomers to access them irrespective of where they are,
Hmm.
irrespective of when they want to access them, and so that they can be plugged into potential opportunities 24/7, even before they even arrive in Canada.
Yeah, that would be really awesome, honestly. Because I always say that when I moved here, one of the things that helped me a ton was I probably spoke to about 20 people before I landed in Canada. Like I was having just what I call informational interviews. I would just
Mhm.
reach out to people and be like, "Hey, I'm moving in January. I would love to just chat and just kind of get a sense of what the economy is like, what jobs are like, and all that kind of stuff." And it really helped me because I do feel like a couple of people come here and just feel lost. Like they just land and you're like, oh, where is it happening? And when you move, like you're right, like like you said earlier on, when you move to a new place, you're dealing with a ton of things. Like there's just the starting all over again. There's all that thing. Then there's the fear of, oh, I don't want to be hell. I don't want to be homeless. I need to pay my bills. I don't want to lose my credit because everyone says to me that if I fall back my
Mhm.
credit, I could be in serious trouble. There's all those things going on, and then so you end up making some very rash decisions sometimes. And
Yep.
why I like what you just said is, if there was just something that could just kind of show you, hey, before you move here, this is where the country is going to, or these are the
Yep.
things that this is what's happening with the country right now, and your skill set could actually be fit into this thing. Maybe something like a quiz that literally tests people and says, like, hey, if you worked in this is you could probably fit into this place in Canada. Something like that could actually also be very helpful. Because I feel like I talked to a ton of people, and you just get that sense that they love the country, where it just feels hopeless. Like it just feels like, where do I even start? Like nothing is working out as I thought it was going to work out, and it just feels like no one wants to help. I'm like, well, yeah, there's actually help out there. You just need to find it, though. I mean,
I mean, I think the challenge is that one of the challenges anyway is that we know as is most opportunities lie, for want of a better word, in the hidden job market. And
yeah,
it's not necessarily what is posted on a job site, but and that's a valuable resource, but also understanding and really understanding where job and opportunities lie may not ever reach a job posting site. And so part of our work is to help lower those barriers and get trained immigrants in front of employers where there isn't actually a job posting, but they're expressing there's a need for talent, and that potentially we can source that talent for them. Because often there's not necessarily an explicit job posting, although that is important, and where there is an explicit job posting. But there's a lot of times when actually, there's a gap or a vacancy, but they're just not actually going through the full process of actually putting it up on the various platforms.
yeah,
So getting people connected to that hidden job market, as it were, is really important to actually securing them a career, not just a job.
yeah. That hidden job market part is one part about Canada that I'm always like, I'm like, it is just so Canadian. It's like you like someone said to me, is networking here has to be your second job. You have to like it has to be a second job. Like you just have to always put yourself out there. Like I like when how you put it when you said you need to become visible. Like people need to put a name to you, or
Mm-hmm.
then that way you can get mentioned in conversations and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, thank you, Simon.
My pleasure, Darcy. I mean, really. So, I mean, what I would suggest people can look at our website, get connected, and we're here to help, here to support people in their career journeys. My reflections, just to leave you with, is for your viewers, is think about where the economy is growing. Where are the growth pockets? Because that's where the future will be in as we go forward, but it's also where the government funding around those sectors will be as well.
Yeah.
And really understand the full scope of where and how you can apply your talents and skills beyond what you've traditionally thought of them, but in all of the potential jobs that actually your skills and talents can fulfill.
Yeah, thank you for that. Honestly, that's because I have never thought of it that way. Honestly, which is basically saying when you're thinking of your career, like just ask yourself, like, where's the country going to? Like, where's the economy going to? And then just kind of align your career, your plan, your job plan to that. Instead of saying, oh, I have to get a job. And so I'm just going to shoot my CV out there because I used to work in marketing before. So I should work in marketing when I move to Canada, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think many roles and jobs will be transformed, particularly those kind of traditional white collar jobs will be transformed with technologies. So again, I think keeping abreast of that is critical. But also, I think it's a question of, again, is look at where, do research, like where are the growth areas? Because that's where the future of our economy lies. And as a result, that's where the future of opportunities and particularly careers will lie in the future too.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah. That was intense. In a good way, though. Because I like that thing he says about you need to start seeing your career as exponential, not linear. Like if there's one thing you take from this episode, it's just that. Is when you move to Canada, the skills you had in your previous country or where you're coming from, they could literally be used in the industry you worked in before you moved here, or adjacent industries, or just it could be used in a lot of places. You just need to know how to apply it. So, as always, if you know someone that should listen to this who find this useful, please send to them. If you know someone I should talk to, send them my way. Anywhere you get your podcast, just type in the Newcomers Podcast. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Overcast, we're on Castbox. Anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us there. Ciao, people.